Welcome to episode 126 of the Sports Geek podcast. This week I catch up with Eric Blankenship from the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals.
And now, here's your host, who claims sneakers on his tax return, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, I do claim my sneakers on my tax return. There are now 8 pairs of Sports Geek shoes. You can actually follow those shoes on Twitter at Sports Geek Shoes. Now up to 8 pairs, 6 pairs of Adidas and now 2 pairs of Nike. I'm really enjoying the latest pair of Nikes, the Pegasus runners, the green ones. You can spot them on the Twitter feed. My name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to the Sports Geek podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and tell us what platform, where you are listening to it. As I say every single episode, I listen to podcasts, not mine. I don't listen to my podcast that often. Actually, not that often, rarely. But I listen to my podcast on Pocket Casts and iTunes. It's also available on iTunes and on SoundCloud. But I'm actually thinking about not putting it up on SoundCloud. It's just not there as a platform, I think, from a podcasting point of view. But if you want to protest and keep it on SoundCloud, please let me know. You can contact me, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, and will get me on the email, or at Sean Callanan will get me on most platforms, Twitter, Instagram. Sean Callanan Speaks if you're looking for me on Facebook. So yeah, please give me any feedback. Tell me where you listen to it, whether you want me to keep it on SoundCloud. Before I get into the interview today, I just want a quick thank you for everyone who voted for my South by Southwest panel. A lot of feedback, a lot of comments. You can still leave comments, but voting is closed, but you can still leave comments that may sway the judges. But hopefully that panel will get up. Really surprised to ran the stats over the South by Southwest stuff. There was over 3,000 panels put forward. 81 of them were in the sports, were under the sports track, and 21 of them were marked as advanced, as ours was. So be very interested to see what panels do get up for March next year. But thank you very much for everyone who voted, tweeted, posted, shared. Very interested in the process, and we'll see how it goes. If you know anybody at South by Southwest, tell them they should try to sway them. I'd really appreciate it. As I said in a few posts, everyone who voted, tell me that you voted, and I owe you all a beer. So let's get into this week's interview with Eric Blankenship from the Tampa Bay Lightning. We had a great chat about his sports business journey, starting off at the Lightning and then ending up back at the Lightning. A really cool campaign around Distant Thunder, and also how success requires changing of your marketing plans and what you have to do to keep a sports team engaged when you're successful in a full stadium. It's a good problem to have. Winning is a good problem. And I discussed that with Eric. So this is my chat with Eric Blankenship from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Very happy to welcome the Vice President of Marketing from the Tampa Bay Lightning, Tampa Bay Storm and Amalie Arena, Eric Blankenship. Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast.
Thank you very much for giving me some time.
That's very good. Now, you got your start at the Lightning and then went on a bit of a sports business road trip and have returned to the Lightning 14 years later. Do you want to give us a little bit of a background of your sports business career so far?
Yeah, you know what? I'm in a very unique situation. I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to come back home. I mean, for me, I was born and raised here in Tampa. I actually grew up 5 minutes away from Amalie Arena, home of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I used to go to games when the Lightning first started many, many years ago, actually about 24 years ago. I was a fan. I went to school here. I went to college here, got my degree at the University of South Florida in marketing, and I started started my first job actually at the Tampa Bay Lightning back in 1998. And the funny part of that story is that I was working full-time, going to school full-time, and I decided to intern here at the Lightning, and any free time I had, which wasn't very much, I spent here. And lo and behold, after a year of working for free, where I got no school credit, I didn't get paid, they decided, you know what, there's a position open, and we might as well hire this guy because he's been here for a year, and that kind of kick-started my career, and I was working at the Tampa Bay Lightning, which was great right out of college, and technically I didn't even have my degree yet. I drove on my lunch breaks and at night, and I took a couple more classes for another 9 months until I got my degree. But I had my dream job as my first job, which was fantastic. But after 4 years, much like in sports, you get the urge to grow, and my ideal growth was definitely some personal growth and professional growth, and there was an opportunity to join Comcast Spectacor based out of Philadelphia, and they owned the Flyers and the Sixers, and I believe about 6 minor league teams, a couple of arenas, ticketing company, sponsorship company, food and beverage company, and a facility management company. So that facility management company is key to my story because I was in Philadelphia for a year and a half. They moved me to Everett, Washington, which is about 23 miles north of Seattle in the Northwest. I opened a new WHL Junior Hockey League arena. I was there for a year and a half. Then they sent me to Portland, Oregon, about 3 hours south of Seattle, where there was 2 venues. One of them was home to a junior hockey league team, but the other one was home to the NBA Trailblazers. After nearly 3 years there, they sent me back to Philly to be the vice president of marketing for the NBA's Philadelphia 76ers, and I was there for about 3 years. And then, quite honestly, I saw what was happening here in Tampa, and I saw Mr. Vinnick became the new owner. He found a way to grab Todd Lewicki, who is a very, very accomplished sports executive, to come from the Seattle Seahawks to Tampa. And then Steve Griggs, who's now our CEO, came here as well. And I told myself and friends that, you know what, I want to be part of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I'd always wanted to find a way back home, and home for me was not only Tampa but was the Lightning. And for whatever reason, it never worked out. But lo and behold, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to Tampa. I took a job as chief marketing officer for a performing arts theater here in Tampa, the Tampa Bay area, which was the first time I was ever out of sports, but it was a way for me in the marketing world to get back entrenched in the market, rekindle old relationships, create new ones, so that when and if the opportunity presented itself to come back to the Lightning, that I would be the right guy. And 2 years ago, that opportunity presented itself, and I joined the Lightning as their VP of marketing. So there's my long-winded answer, but I think you and your listeners know pretty much everything there is to know about me professionally.
But it is, there is there would be similarities to other people's stories in the, taking on opportunities, learn new industries, whether it be facilities management, seeing how things work in different parts of the country, because I'm sure the Northwest and Portland, Seattle is very different to East Coast. So, it's very much something that's, like you said before, professional development, to see how things are working in all the different leagues, being able to look at both, things from a hockey point of view, and then NBA with the Sixers. It just broadens your experience. So it's really, really valuable in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned quite a few of the different variables. I mean, there were times where I marketed indoor lacrosse team, a soccer team, indoor soccer, minor league hockey, arena football, you name it, and I probably did it. And that was just on the sports side. Now you start factoring all the events, concerts, circuses, family shows, and everything in between. I mean, I've marketed on some degree or another, probably hundreds and hundreds of different shows in different markets. And like I said, I'm very fortunate to be back at home, not only in Tampa, but for the Lightning, because in our industry, you don't always get a chance to come back home, especially at a little bit of a higher level. And, I'm very lucky that I had my dream job back in '98, and somehow I found a way to come back to it.
So your role now, VP of Marketing for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the NHL, Tampa Bay Storm, the Arena Football, and then the arena itself, Amalie Arena. So that's all the games, obviously, for the teams, but then the same thing because you've got Amalie Arena, concerts, and anything else that's happening around the precinct. That pretty much all encompasses your role.
Yeah, and the way we're set up here, and again, I'm very fortunate. I take a very active role with the Lightning and the Tampa Bay Storm. When it comes to the events, we're very lucky. We have a very accomplished team of people that really take the lead role in that. I provide, more so than anything, a little bit of insight. We try to leverage some of our other resources to help them out. But day to day, we have a great team that really handles all the events, which is good because we do a lot of events. We're one of the busiest arenas in the country.
So what's how are things at the Tampa Bay Lightning now? I read recently that your season tickets are reaching capacity. It's a really good problem to have from a marketer point of view that you don't have to sell tickets, but how does that change your plans around, getting to a stadium that is capacity, but you also want to continue to engage the Tampa Bay market and keep everyone involved when the sold-out sign starts going out? Like, some people say it's a massive success, but it presents its own challenges.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And, I'll probably say this term more than once, but, at the end of the day, we're still hockey in Tampa. And we won't ever forget that. And it's part of who we are. We embrace it, but also we understand that there are certain challenges that go along with that. And again, ever since Mr. Vinnick bought the team approximately 6 years ago, and he brought in the leadership that is still currently here and all the staff that kind of supports that leadership, we've used a key word here for the past 5 years, and that's transformation. And that's definitely what this organization has done. I mean, it's been a major transformation over the past few years, from not only the team itself, but also the arena, and quite honestly, everything that has to do in between all of that. So, the brand has grown immensely over the past, 5 years, but absolutely exponentially over the past 3. And look, I will never, ever, ever discount winning. Winning matters. Winning helps. Winning is paramount to quite a few different lines of business. But we've focused on growing our brand and really strengthening our brand. And when I use those two words deliberately, growing our brand, I look at it this way. Right now, there's approximately 3.5 million people in the greater Tampa Bay area, which is a pretty substantial size. I mean, we're the 11th largest market in the United States, so not everyone thinks about Tampa Bay being that big of a market, but, we're creeping up on the top 10, and we should be there actually in the next 2 years or so. But according to our research, there's 1.2 million Lightning fans, and that's defined by anyone that watches a game, listens to a game, attends a game, or you have like Lightning merchandise to some degree or another. Now, that number has doubled in the past 2 years. So, just 2 years ago, we were half that. So what that has translated into is that, we're riding a 66-game home sellout streak that goes back not only last season but the season before and in the playoffs. So, we're very fortunate in that. Last year we cut off our season ticket sales at 13,500 versus a capacity of about 19 or 20,000, depending on, how standing room works and all that good stuff. And we cut that off October 1 last year. This year, we cut it off 6 weeks ago at 14,500. And then the first question I always get is, well, why are you cutting off season ticket sales? You always hear about the lifeblood of the organization is season ticket sales, and that's absolutely the case. But, there is some interesting factors that I can give you, and there's a short-term reason and a long-term reason. And the short-term reason is this, is that, in my opinion, there's only two types of people in this market: Lightning fans and someone who's never been to a game. And I wholeheartedly believe that. We put so many resources into our game day experience that if I can just get you to a game, I can get you to be a fan. And that's something that our whole organization believes in. And from a marketing standpoint, I absolutely believe that. And I'm gonna wrap this all up and come back to that statement in a minute. But that is very important. We need to get people to the game because, in my opinion, there's 2.5 million people that aren't Lightning fans. Now, we've been a good team for the past 3 or so years. We went to the Stanley Cup Final 2 years ago, and then we were 2 goals away from going back there last year. We're returning all of our key players this year. They're all young. I mean, we're poised to be a contender for the next several years. So the question is always, well, why don't you keep selling? And the answer is somewhat simple. Going back to my statement, I need people to come to games. I need new people to come to games. I need new people to become fans. And if we sell out all of our tickets to season ticket members, we're limiting the amount of tickets to the general public. And that's something that we know we need to continue to work on. So we want to make sure there's enough tickets out there for the market. And that's very important to us. That is the long-term vision, is we need more people in the Lightning net, so to speak, right? We need more people in that funnel. The short-term reason is, it allows us to keep our season ticket price, relatively speaking, lower. Because as many people know, especially people that are listening to this, your season ticket price is your lowest price ticket. Your single game type price is your highest price ticket. So for us, our ownership, our owner, since it's a singular person, is very aware of the cost associated with going to a game. And even though I've been in situations where, you might have a team that squeaks into the playoff and you go and raise ticket prices 10, 15, 20%, I've sat in 2 years' worth of meetings with our owner when we proposed as a group a little bit higher ticket increases, and for 2 years in a row he says no. And says, you know what, I want very modest increases across the board. I don't want to jack prices up so high to where the cost of attending a game shoots up dramatically. We know we need to stair-step that process, and we need to continue to grow it because at the end of the day, we're hockey in Tampa. And while last season we were number 3 in the league in paid attendance, which is great. I believe it was only Chicago and Montreal, and they have bigger buildings than us, had more paid attendance than us. And again, most people wouldn't think this hockey team in Tampa could boast that, but we did. But in terms of revenue, we're definitely in the bottom half of teams in revenue, and that's because our average ticket price is significantly lower than that of the league. So we know we have a lot of work to do to grow that ticket price. Our owner just doesn't want to do it all at once. He wants a moderate increase. So that's why we've cut our season ticket sales back a little bit. To be fair, it does create more demand for tickets, which I like on the marketing side. So over the course of the year, we still have to work to sell out the games. I can just be a lot more strategic in how I do that. And I don't have to use all my marketing resources to sell tickets now, which kind of goes into your point, what the heck are you guys doing? A lot of what we do now is, again, growing and strengthening the brand. We're out there in this market, whether it's print, radio, TV, outdoor, digital advertising, social advertising, grassroots, events, and everything in between. We're a very active and aggressive team in this market, and it goes back to what I've always said, is that there's no better time to strike than when the iron's hot. Right now we're a hot product. There's a lot of good feelings about this organization, about the ownership, about the team, and I'd rather continue to build the brand when things are going well instead of trying to force people to love me when things are going bad. So that's a lot of what we're doing now, how to continue to build and strengthen that brand and have people continue to feel good about us.
Yeah, I think that I really love that 2 types of people, Lightning fans or people who haven't been to a game yet. I think that's something that all marketers can embrace because you do have those two groups to serve. You want to make sure that your Lightning, your fans are all over what you're doing, both from coming to a game and being in the game and then consuming everything that you're producing. But yeah, you're always got to be growing that market, like you said, filling that funnel. Terrific effort on doubling doubling the Lightning fans from 600,000 to 1.2 million. What were some of the things and some of the successes that helped build that both that awareness, but then sort of getting them to lock in to be a fan, to start tuning into a game? What were some of the things that worked in that space other than winning, which is,
I was going to say, I like I said before, I don't want to discount winning because winning matters, but I definitely am in the belief that when we have a down year, I believe our fans are going to be forgiving of that, and they're going to stick with us. Now, we'll see, because as you know, in sports, everything goes in cycles, You're not going to stay on the top forever, and at some point you'll see a dip here and there. But it's really how you handle those bad times that measure the strength of your brand, right? Because everyone wants to love you when you're good. So for us, there's been a few different things, quite honestly. I don't want to discount the fact that our owner is at the apex of this organization, and we lead by his example. And when he came into this market, he had no ties to Tampa. He was from the New England area, I believe. And he decided to take ownership of this team, but he also took ownership of the city. And what I mean by that is he made a concerted, sincere effort to become part of this community, and more so make this community better. And a lot of teams and organizations can say that, but this guy came in, and Mr. Jeff Vinnick came in and decided, you know what, one of our pillars for success is going to be our community involvement. And he came in and decided to do a myriad of different things to help the community, whether it's donating money, donating time, donating both. We sponsor, I can't tell you how many events we sponsor in the community all the time. We donate money everywhere. We actually have a program that's called the Community Heroes Program, and he started it when he bought the team 5 years ago, and he pledged for 5 years, and he since has pledged again to do it for another 5 years, that every single game there's going to be a community hero that's nominated, and then by a separate third party is awarded $50,000 of his own money to basically make that program better. And he's been doing it for 5 years. We're going to continue to do it. It's to the tune of $10 million. I think it's almost $11 million, because we actually did it in playoffs as well. $11 million of his own money over 5 years. He pledged another 5 years worth. And that's one of maybe 20 community-driven programs that he decided to do. So we're talking about a team that, quite honestly, loses money, is in the bottom of revenues for the organization or of the league. He doesn't want to, increase prices too much. And yet, despite all that, he's giving away money. And this community recognized that and appreciated those efforts to the point where now, I call it the Vinnick factor, matters. People want to be part of this organization. And when you ask season ticket holders, why are you a Lightning fan? Because we did interviews and we looked at the data. You get the people that say, I love hockey. I do it for business reasons. I like bringing my family there. But you also get people that say, you know what, I believe in Mr. Vinnick and what he's doing. And that is unheard of for people to cite your owner as a reason why you're spending your time and money with a team. So much so, and I'm not saying this doesn't exist where I'm going to tell you, I'm just saying I haven't seen it. But if you come to games or watch parties or any of our fan fests, you will see a handful of people with jerseys with his name on the back. You don't see that very often in very many markets, right? There's a myriad of other players you can put on the back, and there are people with Vinnick's name on the back. So what do I attribute our success for? 100% Mr. Vinnick and his vision for this organization. He put $100 million of his own money into this building, whereas a lot of owners are handing out or they're asking for handouts from cities, from counties, from states, to improve buildings or even build new buildings or those things, But he put his money where his mouth is, and for the first 5 years he said, you know what, I'm going to do it myself. I know the Tampa Bay area has a lot of other wants and needs, but this building needs work and needs help, and we want it to be a world-class facility, and he decided to do it on his own. Since then, the city has jumped in and helped, and I think part of the reason why the city's jumped in and helped is because of everything else he's been doing. It makes the ask, quite honestly, a little bit easier when you're willing to have a lot of your own skin in the game. So those are the biggest reasons why I think we are where we are. I mean, again, I don't want to discount winning, but all those other factors, are part of our overall brand.
But it's really important to, when you do get that opportunity, winning is great, is to make sure that you are maximising those opportunities, not sitting on your hands, almost marketing harder when you are winning, because it just has more reach. We see it with other teams having success. We see it with the Warriors, having their success over the last 2 years. Everything that they've pushed out there has gone far further because they're winning. But you've got to take on that opportunity and really run with it. Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing. Again, we're a growing brand in this market, but the interesting thing is, and this may segue into our Distant Thunder campaign a little bit, but for whatever reason, we've noticed, and the social media is great because it allows us to do quite a few things, but for whatever reason, people around the world have chosen and picked to be Lightning fans, and I don't know exactly why or how. But we're seeing more and more people from around the world be Lightning fans. Now, part of it, and again, I don't want to discount winning, but I think part of it is we have a lot of players from all over the world, as evidenced by the fact that we have 12 guys in the World Cup of Hockey tournament. That's a pretty substantial number. I think we have more than anyone in the league, and Callahan was number 13 for us, but he got injured. So at one point we had 13 guys in World Cup, and I think having people from all over the world kind of obviously makes a difference, but we've seen a lot of people around, different countries and whatnot adopting the Lightning as their team. And that's the opportunity, I think, now, for the Lightning and all NHL teams as the coverage becomes more accessible, as they can just dial it up from a digital point of view and watch every game. You as VP of marketing, you've got this dual marketing task now, both marketing into Tampa, into the 3.5 million, growing that to try to find that extra million Tampa Bay fans in the Tampa Bay area. But then the opportunities are endless globally. And so what you can do from a global brand point of view and attract those fans, and then how you go about engaging them and potentially monetizing them is the next question. But it's very much on offer compared to, say, your first stint at the Lightning. Global fans and talking to these fans around the world wasn't even an option. Whereas now, like you said, through the advent of social and digital, it's now available. And a good friend of mine, Natalie Brown, who's been on the podcast when she was at the Storm, and now she's at Collingwood. She puts her hand up and says she's Australia's biggest Lightning fan. And she, I like it. And so, so she's always talking. She was so excited when I said I was going to be talking to you. She actually gave me some of the questions. She was so excited. So I will connect you with Natalie, but tell us a little bit about the Distant Thunder campaign and how you've gone about identifying some of these fans.
So Distant Thunder is a very interesting story, So during our Stanley Cup playoff run, when we ultimately went to the finals against Chicago, not this past season, but the season before, so we work with a local agency to do some of the things that we do, especially when it comes to our overall brand look and feel for the season. They also help us quite a bit on our radio and TV creative. Great local company that actually, ironically enough, just opened an office in London. They're called Dunn & Company. But they're literally based about 5 minutes from us here. But anyway, I remember the owner of the company came into my office, and this is during playoff time, so things are hectic. Things are crazy. He says, "Hey, Eric, I have an idea." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "I want to send some guys to Brazil." I'm like, "Okay, why?" He says, "Well, we have a Lightning fan in Brazil, and we kind of want to talk to him." I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I think it might be kind of cool." And I literally kind of blew it off. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Because the bottom line is they do such great work with us, and they're very in tune with our brand and what we stand for. So if he felt compelled enough to ask me to send people to Brazil, I was like, you know what? I trust you to go ahead and do it. Little did I know that would be the start of something quite big. So they go to Brazil. They send a couple cameras out there, and they meet this guy, Raphael. And basically, and I would definitely ask your listeners to do a Google search for Distant Thunder and Lightning, or you can find it on our website, although our website is about to change over here in the next couple weeks, so who knows where it's going to be then.
I will find it. I will find it and include it in the show notes.
Great. But anyway, we basically found out this guy's in Brazil, and he's a huge Lightning fan. And I'm talking like one of those P1 Lightning fans that all of us clamor for. Lives and breathes Lightning. Listens to us, watches us, wears our gear, spreads the word about the Lightning. But the interesting part of the story is he'd never been to the States. He'd never been to a Lightning game. There's really no connection to the Lightning, so we were wondering, well, how the heck did this happen? So I don't want to spoil too much of it, because I can honestly tell you, when I watch this video, and I've seen the video 50 times, it legitimately makes me pause and really appreciate what I do and how lucky I am to be doing what I do for the Tampa Bay Lightning in this market, because it gives you a real good indication of how important what we do can be. But we get his story. Why is he a Lightning fan? What does it mean? What's his life like? And then the interesting, and again, I'm reluctant to spoil some of it, but I think it's worth giving you and your listeners a little bit of insight. But in the story, he says, I've never been to the United States, and I've never been to a Lightning game. One day I hope I can make it. So we did a 30-second teaser video for this, and we threw it out on social media, not really knowing what to expect. And the amount of feedback we got was just unreal. And you know what everyone was saying? You got to get this guy to a game. And literally, when I saw it for the first time, I looked at my creative director. I'm like, we got to get this guy to a game. And then I showed it to other executives here, and everyone said, how can we get this guy to a game? I'm like, that's what we said. And literally everyone was saying the same thing. So when you watch this video, you'll kind of find out why we all said that. And then the story continues to unfold. There's technically 3 videos. There's a 30-second teaser. There's about a 2.5-minute mini movie on this guy, but then there's I forgot how long the recap is, but there's a recap of his experience, because we do bring him to a game. And again, I won't share the insides and outs of that, but it's definitely worth a watch. But basically what that turned into was something much bigger, and then we realized that there are fans all over the world that are Lightning fans. For some reason, they've adopted us without even really, knowing us, quite honestly, all that well. I mean, they don't live in Tampa. They don't go to games. The only way they know us is through, what they see on TV or on the internet or anything in between. But what we found is they're all over the world. So we decided to aggregate all the content, and we have a microsite on our current website, Distant Thunder. And basically, over the course of the past year or so, people keep submitting photos and videos of themselves supporting the Lightning, mostly with, hats and T-shirts and jerseys all around the world. And it's turned into something much bigger than we ever thought. And now it really speaks to our brand and what it means globally, just as much as what it means locally.
Yeah, that's terrific. And like I said, when I sent that to Natalie and said, "Hey, check this out," she goes, "Oh, I am all over that." So I will definitely connect you with Natalie, because she might put her hand up and say she's Australia's biggest Lightning fan. And I don't doubt her. Don't doubt her at all. One of the last things I wanted to talk to you about, you have discussed a little bit so far. Turnkey Sports surveyed and did a survey of NHL teams, and the Tampa Bay Lightning was rated number 1 for overall game day experience. That's obviously one of the key things, going back to that point before of you've got Lightning fans and people haven't been to a game. What are some of the things that you're looking to do game day to make the Lightning experience the best there is?
Yeah, you know what? It's very humbling for us, because we do put so much effort into the game day experience. And you mentioned Turnkey Sports' poll, and ESPN ranked us number 1, and something very similar to that. And I think Sports Business Journal did it last year as well. So it's nice when different, businesses and companies and websites all kind of come to the same collective agreement, because then we kind of think, hey, we must be doing something right. But you know what? I go back to, there was a concerted effort 5 years ago to basically treat people the way you'd want to be treated. I know that goes without saying, but when you come to our building, and for those of your listeners who ever have, I'd love to hear their comments and see, am I completely making this up? Because, I've been with the Lightning now for 2 years, and 2.5 years ago I would have said the same thing. But when you come here, you immediately feel the energy that exists outside the arena on the plaza. We're very fortunate. We have a big plaza area that allows fans to congregate and, quite honestly, get ready for when the doors open. But, we have people singing songs, chanting, cheering. There's a lot of blue everywhere. There's a lot of Lightning jerseys everywhere. But that experience, from the second you park and you walk into the plaza until you're waiting to come in, kind of begins. It goes without saying, but we have someone on our team here, Mary Milne, who's just done an unbelievable job training our staff, all of our frontline staff, whether it's ushers or security, concession people, ticket takers, ticket office representatives, everything in between, to basically go through extensive training on how to treat people. I mean, it seems kind of simple, and when you go in, a lot of things are very common sense, but the reality is that is a big undertaking, because these are the people that are greeting our most prized fans, and these people aren't in the office every day. I mean, they have other jobs and they have other lives and other responsibilities, but when they come here, we expect them to be on the top of their game, and we put a lot of effort into getting to that point, and I'm telling you, when you come here, people say hello, they say, how may I help you, they look you in the eyes. All those basic, fundamental, attributes you like to see in people, we've gotten to the point where everyone does that. Our game presentation has really been turned into something very clean and organic, whereas there's a lot of teams, I'm not saying this is the wrong way to do something, but there's a lot of sponsor messages and sponsor signage and all that stuff. Ours is very clean, and it very much is about the game. Now, we do have to work in some of those elements. We try to work it into where it's very organic in nature, or it's very relevant to something else that's happening, but we've really taken the notion that less is more. We don't have nearly the amount of partners that we used to have, because it allowed us to kind of pare down the clutter and really focus on certain partners and what their goals are. When you walk around our building, it's a very clean building, and again, that seems like a very normal thing, but that's not always the case. It's very clean. It's kept up. Technologically speaking, we've tried to make sure that we're as technically advanced as we can be, and the challenge with saying that is the second you say that, you're already out of date. But we recognize that, and we continue to do more things, and actually in the coming years, we're going to take a big step forward in that regard. And you know what? It goes without saying, but we have lightning bolts in our arena. We have real lightning bolts. We have Tesla coils that produce lightning during our intro and during when we score goals, and that's kind of cool. I mean, how many different places can you go and you get to see live lightning, right? The game, we have a live organ in the arena, a giant organ in the upper level, and that's another example of how the ownership decided to rip out 600 seats, which is directly tied to revenue, right? I mean, those are people buying tickets. That's parking money. That's concession money. That's retail money. We pulled out those seats and put an organ. Why? Because we thought an organ would be cool and the fans would like it. There's on our lower level concourse, we ripped out 8 suites, and we basically just opened up as an open patio where people can just kind of hang out, gather, and see the game. We're sold out on suites, so that's revenue that we easily could have had, but we decided, it's better for the game experience if we have these open corners where people can just congregate. So there's a lot of different things we've kind of done to make the game experience what it is. And again, I know I've said this many times, but winning helps too. People like a winner. But even when we're not winning, and we don't win every game, we've been very fortunate to win quite a few games at home the past few years, but people will leave and feel like they had a great experience. And obviously food and drinks play a role in that. We put a lot of effort into improving the overall food offerings in the building. So like I say about a lot of things, there's never any one reason for anything. And in this case, there's quite a few reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it is that total sports and entertainment package, and it's a callback to my episode one of the podcast. I had James Royer, who was at the Lightning, talking about Bolt Social Central and some of the stuff that they were doing in stadium. So it just sounds like now, 2.5 years later, you've just gone and taken it to the next level and just kept upping that game. So it's great to hear. I'll have to get to a Lightning game sometime.
Absolutely, you're absolutely welcome anytime.
So we'll finish off this podcast with the Fast 5 questions. What was your first sports event that you ever attended?
My first sports event. Oh my gosh. I'm not going to remember the exact date. I was born and raised in Tampa. We had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's going to be one of two things. It was either a Tampa Bay Buccaneers game or it was a Tampa Bay Rowdies game, which we had the Rowdies, which we currently have now, but it was much different back then. It was a different team, different league, but it was a soccer game. So it had to be either a Buccaneer game or a Tampa Bay Rowdy game.
Very good. And you would have been to a few sports events in your time. Do you have a favorite food at a sports event?
You know what? This is going to sound a little biased, but so I don't know how many of your fans have ever had Little Caesars Pizza. Little Caesars Pizza is a great partner of ours and a great partner in the NHL, but it's based out of Detroit, which is relevant to this story. But we actually have, I don't know if custom is the right word, but Little Caesars provides us with a thin crust pizza in our arena that is unreal. So much so, when we had executives from Detroit, from Little Caesars, here at the arena, they commented on how fantastic the pizza was and wanted to know where we got it. They didn't even know that there is an option to do a thin crust pizza, and we actually do it here.
Oh, that's very, very good. And first app that you open up in the morning is what?
First app is definitely Twitter.
Twitter, okay. And if there's, who would you nominate for Sports Geek Podcast listeners to follow, read, consume, and why? Is there someone either on the Twitter or a writer or those kind of things?
Does an author count?
Does a what count?
There's a writer, like an author or a writer.
Yeah, of course
count?
they do. Of course they do.
Okay, so outside of myself, as my shameless plug, because on my Twitter, I try to give people a little bit of an inside look to what it means to be a VP of marketing. So I share some business stuff, some professional things, some personal things. It's a little weird and wonky sometimes, but outside of myself, which I think I'm at least moderately interesting, Malcolm Gladwell is definitely someone who I definitely enjoy, hearing and reading and seeing what he's doing. I think he's most famous for a book called The Tipping Point, which quite a few people have read.
And the 10,000 hours rule is
10,000 outliers. I mean, there's so many things that it's funny because he uses some sports analogies and examples, but then when you look at other things, I think it can be applied a lot to some real life.
Yep.
But he's a very, very insightful and interesting guy.
Have you listened to his new revisionist history podcast?
You know what? You're the second person who told me about that. I didn't know about that, and I just heard about it. So something I'm definitely going to check out. Yeah,
so I've listened to a couple of them. He does a really good one on the science of free throw shooting and why more NBA players should shoot underhand, like Rick Barry. Because apparently Will Chamberlain did it for a whole year, had his best free throw shooting year, and went back to doing it the wrong way.
That is fantastic.
But I regularly listen to him when he's on podcasts. He's a regular on Bill Simmons' podcast, and it's always good. Yeah. So well and truly endorse that, as well as I endorse you. Self-promotion is completely allowed. So Blankenship is your Twitter handle. If people can follow you,
I got in early on Twitter. That's why I was able to get that handle.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. You got to get your name or something along the lines of your name. I got my name and secured it. It's like the other Sean Callanan, who's an archer, did not get it. So he's constantly shaking his fist at me. But it's always good. And then, so you mentioned Twitter a couple of times now. Now that you said, the last question is, what is your social media MVP? And as I said, everyone can be your personal choice, or maybe what is getting the best results for you as a team?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you. Our social media person, Kenzie Janke, who's awesome. I believe, and she would probably laugh if I said this, she's a little partial toward Twitter, with a little bit of a second partialness to Instagram. So for us, I mean, we've kind of seen Facebook in terms of growth level off a little bit. I mean, we've got a fair amount considering the size of our market and our fan base, which is great. And engagement is still really, really strong with Facebook. We've seen significant growth with Twitter, and one of the things I like about Twitter is the real time experience that exists there. It's just, and I use Twitter, probably like a lot of people. It's where I get all my news, regardless of what that news is about. That's where I go to get news. I mean, TV isn't where I go first, and print, I don't know last time I read a newspaper, but it's kind of where I go to get news about literally anything and everything. But we have seen significant growth this past year in Instagram, and from a percentage standpoint, Snapchat. Now, it's interesting because I think now with the new initiatives that Instagram has launched, stories, I mean, I'd like to see how that's going to affect Snapchat, and see if Snapchat tries to reinvent itself a little bit so it can fit in, because Instagram's got a little bit of what should I say? They have a head start a little bit on Snapchat already with the user base.
They do.
So we'll be interested to see how that works. And you know what? It's interesting because we use a lot of social platforms for a lot of different reasons. And it'll be, I always, and maybe since I'm talking to you in the future, I am very curious to find out, well, what's social media going to look like in 5 years? Because 5 years ago, it was dramatically different than what it is now. If you go back 10 years, well, now it's not even around. So I can't wait to see what happens in the next 5 years. And 10, I can't even imagine.
I think you probably, even though I am only a day in the future, recording this the morning after your evening, I think the thing is, like, even 6 months is a long way away right now, because we have got this current Instagram stories versus Snapchat sort of thing playing out. Effectively, Instagram's gone and they've got two products in the one product now, with the stories and the Instagram that we once knew, and it sort of depends who I talk to, whether they're in that younger demo, really in the Snapchat camp, or people who are coming from an Instagram base. There is a case for, because Facebook, which owns Instagram, I think most people who are listening will know that, they're so innovative and looking to change, and Snapchat is exactly the same way. They're rolling out new changes, almost weekly. It's that quick. We could see in 6 months that Instagram go, oh, no, we're not doing the stories, and killing it off. It could actually educate a whole market on what, this messaging type platform, how it works, and effectively sort of make Snapchat mainstream normal. That's how you shoot stories, and that's how you consume it. So I think it's still to be played out. I think at the moment, if you're on Instagram, you've got a base. Yes, you should be putting out stories because it's a new platform. We still don't know exactly what people need and what people want, but it is tough. It is tough for people who are running those social channels, because how are you going to make your Instagram story different from your Snapchat story and not have that sameness, because you still want to be driving different fans there. So I think I think there's still a fair bit to play in the next 18 months. Will be really important for Snapchat. I think that some of the things that they're doing on the media side are making it very interesting. Like, I think the deals Snapchat are doing with things like the Rio Olympics, and they did it in NBC, they did it with Channel 7 over here, a different point of view of games. I think potentially as that type of as they do those kind of deals, potentially even in market, if you're able to produce Tampa Bay relevant stories and integrate partners and monetize it, I think that's going to be something that Snapchat has a bit more flexibility to do, whereas Facebook and Instagram aren't as nimble, because they're really, really big organisation now. So Snapchat has to take advantage of that nimbleness, I think, if it's going to differentiate itself from the Instagram stories, because if it keeps that sameness, then people will be going, I don't need to be on that. So A little bit to be played out, but I think in 12 months' time, it'll be very different. Because I can always point back to, I think it was episode 28, when I told everybody, don't bother with Snapchat, it's not going to be any good. And then they went and rolled out, Snapchat stories, and you can see a whole day, and it wasn't just private messaging. So it only takes a few pivots to become, a messaging service, which it still primarily is, to actually being a really functional storytelling device. So it just, as it opens up, and I think what you'll find, with the season coming up, I think you'll find more of your players will be using Snapchat as a public tool, as a broadcast tool. I think we saw that in Rio with a lot of athletes using it. It sort of gets them away from that trollish nature that sometimes Twitter can be, and they can just be telling their story. I think you're going to get some really good, rich stories from your players. In the Snapchat space, and that will actually probably drag a fair few people across as well.
Only time will tell.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. So we've already given your Twitter handle a plug, Blankenship. Is there anywhere else where people can find you?
That's probably the best place. It's funny, I used to have a few different platforms, and I got to the point where I don't think I was serving them all, well. So I kind of just focused, most of my time on Twitter. And like I said, it's interesting because sometimes I might share a few things I probably shouldn't share, but I try to be honest and, give someone an inside look to what the hell a VP of marketing for a professional hockey team does, especially when you have a wife and kids and all these other things in the mix. So hopefully it's at least moderately interesting.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I got a fair few of my questions from your Twitter feed, so that definitely helped me. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me anytime, and I look forward to having you come on this side of the ocean and checking out what the heck's going on here in Tampa.
Looking forward to it.
Take care.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Eric Blankenship, Blankenship on Twitter. Please send him a tweet. He does do, as he said on the interview, shares a little bit of insights into his job, running marketing and all things digital at the Lightning. So send him a tweet, tell him that you're listening, that you've listened to the podcast, and please check out the Distant Thunder video. I've put the initial teaser up into the show notes, and there'll be a few other links to Roberto's trip to Tampa Bay, so you can follow that Distant Thunder campaign, as well as checking out the website lightningdistantthunder.com if you're a Thunder fan. If you're a Lightning fan and part of the Distant Thunder tribe, you can mark a pin on the map and tell people where you are. I'm just going to wrap this podcast up quickly because I know it was a long interview, but I recently did a Q&A session as a follow-up to the Golf Business Forum. And one of the questions I was asked by the people there was, what tools do I use at Sports Geek to sort of keep all things social and all things digital sort of moving and the appropriate data flowing through the system? So I'm going to quickly run through some of the tools that I use. I'm not going to explain them fully and tell you exactly how they're all wired together, but I'm going to take you through a bit of the digital plumbing behind Sports Geek. If you want more information, or if you're interested in any of these, please just send me an email or set up a time for me to give you a call, and we'll chat about it further. So some of the tools that I use, lead pages. If you've signed up for SportsBiz Slack, you would have used a lead page. I'm finding lead pages really effective in building out landing pages for either campaigns like the South by Southwest campaign, downloads from speaking events, and also I've also used the Lead Digits product, which is really powerful, allows people to text in a word and get on the email list. So finding lead pages really good. Starting to use Center. It's marketing automation platform to wire a few different things together, where I can do things like people sign up on a lead page and I can add them automatically to a Facebook custom audience. So there's a few really cool features in Center, but it's still a developing product. I use MailChimp at the moment for my email lists, but I am considering the move to Drip. Drip was recently acquired by Lead Pages, and it does its mail automation and mail tagging a little bit differently to MailChimp. So I'm testing that out. It looks really cool as far as the tagging ability. So having one list that is tagged multiple ways rather than the MailChimp method of everyone is in different lists. I use Calendly a lot. Calendly is the way that people get booked in my calendar. If you're a client, you've used Calendly to book in for a go-to meeting. If you've ever booked in for a phone call or a podcast interview, you use Calendly. It's a terrific tool to book meetings without that backwards and forwards of email. I'm obviously using Slack a lot. You can sign up for the SportsBiz Slack by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack. There's nearly 500 people in that group now. I use it both with SportsGeek and Chunky Media, but also the SportsBiz Slack. I'm using it with a few clients. It's a really effective way to communicate with teams outside of that email setting. So if you're not in Sports Business Slack, please join. I use workflowy.com. It's a really good dot point note-taking tool. I can write up a whole bunch of notes from a call or from a meeting, or in this case, the show notes and what I'm doing for the podcast, and then I can just share those notes with someone. So I've been using Workflow for nearly 18 months now. It's quite invaluable. I'm using Canva a lot for a lot of the graphics for the podcast, or if I'm not using it, Meg's using it when she's putting together the show notes. So I think it's really valuable to just churn out really quick, standardized graphics. It's using tradable bits, as discussed on a few podcasts. Did one with the Vancouver Whitecaps and Darshan, founder of Tradable Bits. I'm using that for campaigns, especially with sponsors, and recently did a whole bunch of Tradable Bits campaigns around voting, player of the game voting for Hockey Australia that went really successful. Lately I've been really diving in on how to best use Google Tag Manager, and finding it a really effective way to instrument the Facebook events, pixel events, because once you've set up Google Tag Manager, you can then put in all the code that you need in your website. So if you haven't got Tag Manager set up, it is a once-off painful thing to get your geeks to install, but once it's installed, it's effectively a backdoor into your website, and you can start installing these cool pixels and things like that. They can be timed, they can be fired at only on certain pages, those kind of things. And really a hat tip to Dennis Yu, former guest from Blitzmetrics, for some of the documentation on how to set up Google Tag Manager. Really valuable, really useful when you're trying to set up that digital plumbing side of your website. And I guess the last one that I use a lot is Buffer. So I use Buffer to both schedule my tweets and posts across different platforms, whether it be LinkedIn, a couple of the Twitter accounts, SportsGeek or Sean Callanan, and even, I even give Google Plus a little bit of love through my Buffer, but that's about all it gets. So that's it. That's some of the tools that I use. I'd love to hear what tools you use. As I said before, send me an email, Sean at SportsGeekHQ, or just send me a tweet. Tell me if there's a tool that you use that you're finding is pretty cool and it's doing the job for you. The last thing I want to do is I want to promote all the Sports Business Week activities that are going to happen in the week of September 11 to 15. I think they're all happening in. It is a brainchild of Russell Scobetti. I've run some SB Week of events in previous years down here in Melbourne. I think Russell has got 48 cities involved. So, yes, that is right. Thank you very much, James, for putting in the applause there. Very much well-deserved applause for Russell Scobetti. If you go to sportsbusinessweek.com, it will redirect to the SB Week 16 page with all the cities involved. I will have a link in these show notes going to that as well, but also you can go to thebusinessofsports.com to find out more about that. We're running one in Melbourne in September. On September here it is. I should have actually checked. It is the 13th. I want to say the 13th. Yes, I do. The 13th, it's going to be at the Honey Bar, where we've had previous SB Weeks. looking forward to seeing a few people who have been guests on the podcast, like Natalie Brown, who got a shout out in today's episode with Eric. Hopefully Shane Harmon will also be turning up from Westpac Stadium. So please turn up. We'll have a chat, do a bit of networking, and please, join up with other events around the world. So there's a fair few happening in the US, and I think there's also some happening in Europe. So go to sportsbusinessweek.com, check out Russell Scabetti, ask Scabetti, send him a tweet, and get involved. It's a great way to connect with sports business executives, and it's just a good way to compare notes and see what other people are doing. So I hope to see you at the Melbourne one on September 12. As I say September 12, I mean September 13, at the Honey Bar. There will be a link in the show notes to purchase tickets. Until next week, my name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you've been listening to the Sports Geek podcast.
Like the Sports Geek podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek podcast.